Pretty stunning new evidence that was released in the George Zimmerman Trayvon Martin murder case, and it happened by the Florida State Attorney. They released emails and interviews with witnesses. It totaled 300 pages. Those interviews were done by the FBI, all part of an investigation. And in conclusion, it found no direct evidence that Zimmerman had any racist feelings, that racism had nothing to do with any alleged crime. What does it mean for the case against Zimmerman? Let's bring in attorney David Schwartz, who is a defense attorney right now. David, if you had this case, boy, it's a doozy. First of all, the stand your ground law in Florida gives the judge the opportunity to take a look at this case first. In fact, George Zimmerman's attorney has tried again to get rid of that judge, to ask him to recuse himself. He feels like he's prejudiced. First of all, what do you think about that? Does he deserve a different judge?
No, I mean, unless there's actual evidence to show that the judge is prejudiced against his client, the standard is, as long as you get a fair trial, you can't judge pick, you can't form shop and judge pick and do all this stuff unless you have hard evidence that the judge is prejudiced.
Okay.
And I don't see any evidence of that so far.
So now additional hate crime charges could have been brought, especially if this report, and the prosecutor could still go ahead with it, but this report suggests racism had nothing to do with the death of Trayvon Martin at the hands of George Zimmerman. So does this really help Zimmerman's case, or is there enough going on otherwise that he could still be charged, as he is, and convicted of murder?
Well, yeah, Jamie, he's charged with murder in the second degree, which could have a life sentence. I think the hate crimes come in from a strategic advantage for the prosecution. If they're able to get those hate crimes charged, there may be a lot of other prior bad acts that the prosecution could get in to prove those hate crimes that they ordinarily wouldn't be able to use in a normal murder prosecution. But so far, there's no evidence of a hate crime at all.
Okay, very, very interesting. But let's talk about at least some of the things that stuck out at me. Criminal defense is not my legal expertise, it's yours. However, just legally thinking about it, they say that he's got a hero complex, that he grew up, he had some, not necessarily abuse, but a bit of an abusive childhood. Is any of that relevant or admissible?
Well, it all depends on what kind of defense the defense is going to use. If it's just a standard stand-your-ground self-defense case, then his history growing up is not going to be relevant whatsoever. It's not like there's a psychological defense involved with this case. I think the hero complex could possibly help the prosecution if they're able to get an expert witness in to explain that hero complex, and that may have an effect on the self-defense.
All right,
so we'll see how that plays out, Jamie.
Interesting. Let's ask former prosecutor and trial attorney Kirsten Wilson joining us now. Kirsten, thanks. Where do you think the state attorney is right now in thinking? You have a judge who has been a little disgruntled about the fact that he felt George Zimmerman and his wife lied about the finances they had. Now this report comes back, potentially no hate crime charges, but he's still charged with murder. How strong is the case?
It definitely took some blows with this new evidence that's been released for all the reasons that you just spoke about. The elimination of the race card is a huge piece of the case, and it certainly, as we've seen throughout the country, is one that has brought an emotional charge to it that's captured everyone's attention. But there are some things that are helpful. The hero complex. A lot of it's going to go to the reasonableness of his actions on that day. And there's also consistent testimony from a new eyewitness that says she saw someone on top of the other person during the fight, and that person ended up dead on the ground.
Yeah, I can't
There's also
imagine
information.
Let me ask you one thing. I've never seen so many inconsistencies between testimony that was given and bandages, and he told police that his head was hit on the concrete multiple times by Trayvon. Then the doctor or physician's assistant says no x-ray and CAT scan is necessary. Why are we hearing so much of this information, Kirsten, at this point when they haven't even had a jury seated?
I often have thought about that and about what's going through Angela Corey's head, and I think a lot of it is to deflate the expectations of the population as to the strength of this case. Any case, though, that you're dealing with a criminal defense where you have eyewitnesses, you're going to have inconsistencies. Within the police department itself, you have people saying he had, a bloody nose and injuries, and other people saying they didn't notice anything.
Yeah,
but what we do know is that there is some evidence by eyewitnesses that does support the way that Zimmerman has portrayed the case, including the contact residue from the fire, from the bullet hole in the sweatshirt, which is important.
I'm out of time, Kirsten and David. I appreciate it so much. He wasn't charged for 44 days. We're going to learn a lot more about the case. Thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
And thanks so
That's it for
much
us.
to you for being here. Kelly, great.